This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.
Okay, I am calling to order this meeting of the Easthampton Rent Study Committee on February 3rd, 2026 at 6 p.m. First on the agenda is public speak. Is there anyone here that wants to speak anything to the public record?
So my name is Laura Connor. I read at a city council meeting back in December. It's just a little statement I have. So I live at 324 Main Street and my landlord is Pine Valley Realty. I came to the city council, not to complain, but to inform you what's happening to the citizens of Easthampton. In October, my rent was increased 47%, which was $350 a month. I was informed that this increase was due to the landlord wanting to get ahead of rent control. Also, the rent was increased, according to the landlord, due to water, electricity, and maintenance going up in price. A side note concerning my maintenance, I do not have maintenance on weekends or at night. There is an emergency number that you can call, but no one answers. So I was recently informed that if there was a problem on the weekends or at night, I was to call the non-emergency police number and they would contact the landlord. Due to this increase, I have had to come out of retirement. I retired 3 years ago after working for 3 doctors in Northampton for over 30 years. Presently, I don't want to move. My family and my support system are here in Easthampton, and I've lived here for over 40 years. Of note, elderly housing has a 5 to 10 year waiting list, and there are 4,000 people on the waiting list. Thank you for your consideration. That was what I read to the city council back in December. The rent went up in October.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wants to speak?
Just real quick, I live at, my name's Alex. I live at Rail Trail Apartments on the corner of Westlake and Coldaf, and we're dealing with a similar situation to the Pine Valley tenants. Many issued rent increases of in the neighborhood of $300 effective January 1st. They specifically cited the possibility of rent stabilization.
Sorry, I didn't catch your name, sir.
Alex.
Alex? Alex, what's your last name?
Tracy the Younger. Tracy hyphen.
Yeah.
D''Unger.
Thank you.
I'd just like to take a minute. My name's Steve Galacqua. I live over on Rail Trail. So the same thing, had a rent increase in April for $150. And now 2 days after Thanksgiving in $325. So, add them up. And it's ridiculous. They're concerned about this rent freeze. And basically, so you're asking me to invest in your business? This is, you have a concern about your bottom line, okay, your business down the road. I shouldn't have to front load this. Am I getting a rate of return? Can I put it in an escrow account? What if it doesn't pass? Do I get my money back? Nothing, just blank stares. So, I mean, it's ridiculous. Okay, you can't do this in any other industry. And I'll do it in the form of a question this evening. I already made a statement. Okay, but you got a driver's license if you want to drive. If you want to be a contractor, you can study under somebody. You can go ahead, you can get your supervisor's license. Okay, for doing contracting work, swinging a hammer and doing all kinds of trades. Plumber, licensed. Electrician, licensed. Everything is licensed. Okay, and you have to maintain a good license in order to be able to continue that practice. How come landlords aren't licensed? And could landlords be licensed? 6 units or more, if you're an LLC or if you're a corporation, you sit down, you go to your license on how to become a good landlord. different things that you're supposed to do, things you're not allowed to do, so many things that landlords are doing that they're not supposed to be doing, electrical work and plumbing work. Okay, but if they were licensed, it could be tracked a little bit more. There would be a fee, just like every place else has a fee. And that fee goes into a slush fund to help people who don't have the money for their rent. Okay, or you can set it up with all kinds of different committees and whatnot. But it would be a start. So in the long run, you wouldn't have slumlords and whatnot. I mean, if you have so many different offenses and whatnot, you could be fined. You could be this. You could lose your licensing unless you conform and you do the right thing. You know, being a landlord is offering housing. Okay, not something that you went to school to learn how to invest your money and profit as much as you can without doing the maintenance. Just keep pulling the money in. And this is what's happening all over the country. So that's my 1 minute. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right. The next on the agenda is a welcome and brief introduction to our new member, Carl Saylor. He is a tenant in the community. I wanted to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself and to the group and also to the community.
All right, thank you very much. I am, as stated, Carl Saylor. I've been a resident of Western Massachusetts only since 2019. I relocated out here to be closer to family. And I've been a resident of Easthampton since about 2021. I came with the opening of the new cooperative on Northampton Street. I was actually one of the people that helped set up the store. I was one of the first people they tapped from the old store in Northampton to make the jump to the new location. And so that's basically how I got here. As to why I am here in this space, I'm also a resident of the rail trail like Alex and Steve. And I've been helping them rabble-rouse with the Easthampton Tenants Union. I've also done a bit of a investigation on our own grounds. Me and Alex attended a meeting of the Easthampton Housing Authority, I believe in December and in January, to introduce ourselves, make networks, present our stories, and essentially just ask, how does public housing in Easthampton and Massachusetts in general expand? And I'm sure he'll be happy to tell you we were rather disappointed to hear that not only does public housing not expand, but there's probably going to be an attempt to privatize it in the not too distant future. Mm-hmm. So make no mistake, this is going to get worse.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm sure I can speak for the whole committee. We're really happy to have you and to bring your voice to the conversations that we're going to be having.
Thank you very much.
Does anyone else have anything to add?
Should we introduce ourselves so Carl can know? And actually, I can't remember if we ever did.
Yeah, sure. I just want to be respectful because we have our guests waiting. So if we just want to keep it quick, yeah, definitely. If you want to start.
Oh, I'm Carolyn Cushing, and I'm on here because I'm a landlord. I have an attached apartment, and I'm also part of the arts community and want Easthampton to retain the quality. But affordability had made it for artists and tenants and formerly. Welcome.
And I'm Chaim. We've met before, but I've been involved in housing advocacy in the community for a while now. I'm currently a city councilor at large and chair of this committee. So really happy to see you.
Donna Chappello. I'm an attorney, former public defender. I still do a little bit of work privately. I joined the Fair and Affordable Housing Partnership about almost 2 years ago, I guess, and have just been learning about housing issues because it was kind of it wasn't something I had studied. So I've been doing that, and then I have a couple of kids in 30-ish range, and their friends, and all of them have issues with housing. All of them are renters. None of them can afford to buy. So this issue has come up personally for me. And so I volunteered to work on this committee, and here I am.
Hi, Deb, City Council.
We
I'm
correspond.
just, I just, I'm the person online, so. I'm Janet Tatro. I'm the chair of the Affordable and Fair Housing Partnership. And I spent about 15 years earlier in my career working on affordable housing issues, both advocacy and policy. And I worked at a local housing authority, and now I work at Community Action Pioneer Valley.
Felicia Jadzak, also in City Council representing Precinct 2. I was a lifelong renter until I moved to Easthampton in 2021. I am a landlord with one attached apartment right now, but otherwise, that's what I'm here for, to figure out how we can solve these problems.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. And I will definitely work with
David.
Oh, sorry. David, if you want to introduce it.
Well, hi, David Boyle, Easthampton resident, landlord, developer, and I'm part-time. Anyway, just a local landlord. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And I will follow up with you just to answer any questions you have and just what's happened in previous meetings.
I watched the previous meeting.
Oh, great. Okay.
I believe I have basically what has been discussed so far.
All right. Well, if you want to meet with me at some point to talk more, definitely we can.
And we're missing one member?
Yes, we're missing Kevin. Yeah. All right. So without further ado, I want to extend gratitude and to our guests here, Paige and Sheila. Sheila, I guess, was able to make it.
Yep.
To talk with us about the 2022 City of Boston rent stabilization home rule petition process. I don't know if you guys want to quickly introduce yourselves. I have like 3 slides just to remind everyone of the process, but.
Sure. So I'll go. Sorry, I'm a few minutes late. I was at another meeting. Sheila Dillon, I'm Chief of Housing for the City of Boston and Director of the Mayor's Office of Housing. Good to see you. Paige?
Great. Thanks, everyone. Hi, apologize. I'm joining from a car. Was touring offsite manufacturing facilities all day and traffic is horrible. Thankfully, I'm not the one driving. So I am happy to participate and hopefully we'll have great service along the way. I'm Paige Russa. I'm the Director of the Housing Innovation Lab for the City of Boston and the Mayor's Office of Housing. I work under Chief Dillon and was the project manager for the Rent Stabilization Advisory Committee and the listening sessions. So happy to be here.
Thank you both. So just quickly going through the process, to remind everyone, in March of 2022, that's meant to say, Mayor Wu formed the Rent Stabilization Advisory Committee. The purpose was to study the housing market in Boston and enable to initiate the home rule petition process. Just to remind everyone, the home rule petition process allows municipalities to request special permission to override state law or create additional regulations. Their process included 6 committee meetings made up of housing advocates, developers, tenants, and others. They also learned about case studies. They learned about the key policy parameters and discussed and recommended the final local policy details. To collect data, they conducted 5 public listening sessions focused on different types of community stakeholders. So a general listening session, and then they had 2 tenant-focused listening sessions, 1 for property owners and 1 for labor and workforce stakeholders. The key policy pillars or the questions that they're really asking, and we went over this before, is setting the rent cap. So what is the limit and how is it set? Decontrol, exemptions related to both what expenses can be passed on and also the types of housing stock, and then the details around administration, whether it was a rent board or that kind of thing. The final policy outcome was they decided on a total cap of 10, but it was tied to the consumer price index plus 6%. And it exempted certain housing units built in the last 15 years and some small owner-occupied properties. The final policy and petition was presented in January of 2023, and it was approved by the City Council in March of 2023. It was delivered by the state legislature, and then it timed out in the committee. So the reason why I feel like this is such a good model for Easthampton is that right now this state legislature is debating lifting the preemption. So setting this process in motion starts the process of us tailoring a local policy for Easthampton that could be put in place if that were to be lifted. It also builds broader stakeholder buy-in by ensuring all of the stakeholders related to housing in the community are heard from and included in the process. And then it also increases pressure on the state to address housing affordability if the preemption isn't lifted. So awesome. I wanted to open it up for questions, but I also have primer questions. So if anyone doesn't have anything jumping out at them immediately, I guess first off, would you guys say that that was an accurate representation of the process?
Yep.
Yes.
We did have, the only thing I would add is that we did actually have a public comment form that folks could respond to, and we did have hundreds of public comments. It was a Google form that, which people could comment on.
And do you mind putting the closed captions on?
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
That good? Yeah, I feel like it's me.
Can I ask a follow-up question of Paige?
Yeah, sure.
So Paige, you said you had a Google form for responses. Do you have a sense of like who responded? Was it more tenants, more landlords? Like what was the?
That's a great question. I'd have to get back to you and just take a look at the data. It was a couple of years ago, so I'm not sure, but I know there were hundreds of comments received through it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And did you find those comments to be helpful, or did you find them to be like, I listened to some of the listening sessions, and particularly with the tenants reporting the things that were happening to them, rather than making suggestions, there was a lot of discussion about, this is what happened to me personally, and this is how, they were devastating stories. But did you find that when people responded in writing, that there were more responses that gave you additional ideas to think about or to follow up on, or was it more of the devastation that people were facing?
I'll take a look and find the summary. I can even look it up. We have it on the drive, so I can look for it. My gut's saying it was similar to what we heard in the listening sessions, and I would say that was one of the things that I found most challenging about this process in the listening sessions. Of what was really, I thought, surprising was just the number of speakers that were commenting on issues that were not, digging into the meat of the policy and not about rent stabilization, and using the time more as an opportunity to express concerns about housing in Boston more generally, despite our efforts at the beginning to frame this as, we're focusing on the policy pillars. This is a conversation about rent stabilization specifically. Here are all the other things that we're doing to try to address housing needs in Boston. We're trying to do everything we can. It's a puzzle of all these different policy and programmatic solutions. But it's still, it was a housing in general kind of, sometimes it seemed like just a venting session that was sometimes challenging to really feel like it was being productive. I think people needed to be heard, but it was really hard to keep people focused.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
If we get hold, thank you. So along those lines, with the listening sessions, I guess I was curious what sort of the most surprising things were that you guys learned that was applicable to the policy.
I'll jump in because I attended. I didn't organize them. Paige did, and it was a massive undertaking. I'm not so sure. I mean, looking back now, it's well over a year or 2 years ago. I think that a lot of the folks that were commenting, a lot of the tenants that were commenting were just having, were able to vent and talk about their own personal situation. I think the beauty of the listening sessions, we did start them with, sometimes I thought it was too long and we were talking too much, but we really did start with more of an education about what the components were and what we were thinking. So I think it was more education for us to provide and maybe less, really in granular, useful information. I mean, there was a mention here and there, but a lot of the tenants were organized by larger organizations in Boston, and we were just hearing, we need, we want. So I'm not so sure we ended up, but Paige, correct me if you think I'm wrong. We ended up with a scads of useful information to go through. But it's really, in Boston anyways, it's really important to give people voice, even if sometimes the voice isn't like exactly the information that you need or you're seeking. It's just, we can't do anything without a lot of community process. So.
Well, I thought it was really interesting that you did that sort of education piece at the beginning of each of those listening sessions. And there was a lot of information in there. And by the time I got to the third or fourth one, I kind of skipped over it because I'd already heard it. But,
blame you.
But it was, no, I wondered if you had in mind at the time that you developed those questions, was that what you were thinking? Were you thinking about educating people or just thinking about focusing?
Probably both. I mean, I think we always hope that we're going to hear things that are going to be really relevant from people's life experiences that we can put into a policy. But, we have a mayor that really, her first question will always be, who have you talked to? How much outreach have you done? Right. So I think it's not about checking the box, because I don't believe in just checking the box. I think some people do. I really am dying to hear, but it's really complicated too. Do you have vacancy decontrol? Do you know CPI? What does that mean? Like, it's just for the average tenant that's trying in Boston, trying to get by. It is, it's maybe it's unrealistic to ask that they're really going to be dissecting the components of a bill. Developers do. I'm not so sure tenants do, but Paige, please correct me if I'm wrong.
No, I mean, I think you're totally spot on. And I think that what ended up happening, I know one of the primary questions that I had sort of been reflecting on was like, what were the most controversial aspects of the policy, which pillars were the hardest to decide on as an advisory committee. I think what's happening is because so much of the feedback we got was not necessarily like, we need a 3% cap, or things would be great if we just had vacancy decontrol, a cap, and this applied to everyone. Like, we're not getting clear feedback like that. And so, and a lot of times we're just getting like directly opposing feedback if people did actually weigh in on the policy. Mm-hmm. It's kind of left to the call that.
Paige, you're breaking up.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me?
Why don't you try going off camera? I know one's gonna. Yeah, could you go off camera maybe for clear? Yeah.
Yeah, try. Can you guys hear me?
Okay. That's better.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think what ended up happening was, because so much of the feedback we were getting was either, not directly related to the pillars, or if it was, I think it was all over the board in terms of the feedback that we were getting, with the exception of, I think, the exemption for new construction, right? I think that's something that's like, okay, yeah, exempting construction. I don't know that anyone was really arguing about that. Other than that, I think we were getting feedback that was all over the board, if it was relevant at all. And so what that meant was that it was really up to the advisory committee at the end. We were like giving them these summaries, and I think that they really appreciated that. We were sort of looking to them like, okay, what do you guys want to do? And I think they were, remember distinctly a couple of advisory members saying like, this is really hard. I'm so glad we're not in staff's shoes, because it's really, I don't, we're getting
No, Paige, you're breaking up. And let me just see. And to finish Paige's thought, I think you're right. I think it did come down to the advisory to really get into those details, to read articles that we were giving them, to like really study the issue. But some of the advisory members did listen into the listening sessions, and we're hearing from the general public as well. So I think there was a good, we were hosting these very large listening sessions. They were very well attended. advisory members were attending. So I feel like they were incorporating what they heard, even if it wasn't terribly specific.
And when you decided on the listening sessions and on the pillars, were you looking at other jurisdictions, and did you have other models that you were interested in as like potential models for Boston?
Yeah, so we and Paige, I don't know if you're in a better place, but we did a lot of research on rent stabilization in other communities, other states, other cities, how they were structured, what was more restrictive. So we did provide that to the advisory panel early on as part of, we spent a lot of time with the advisory, really trying to educate them on the components of rent stabilization, but also what other cities were doing. So there was a fairly significant research component.
Thanks, Sheila, for jumping in here. And if you guys can hear me, I think have you looked at the Minneapolis study?
Yeah, so
I think we had that cited.
Sorry, yeah. So I actually got in touch with Professor Ed Goetz, and he's gonna come give a presentation.
Right.
So that should be, and I know you guys use that a lot. So
yeah, we did, and it was very, very helpful.
Really helpful. I mean, that was just such a great way. Yes, you can study the different models of what cities have, and we did provide that, that sort of matrix to committee members so you could see kind of the spectrum of how they're set up. But I mean, I'd never seen anything like the Minneapolis study that I think did such a good job breaking it down into what the key questions were. And having worked on rent stabilization in the Bay Area, when I saw the Minneapolis study and I joined, and Sheila said, "Should we use this as our guiding framework?" It was like, yeah, this is it. I can't see any other way of doing this other than using this framework.
Yep.
Awesome.
You mean
now we know Minneapolis is just a great place, right? And of course they came up with a great study, but
leading the way.
So, Paige, were you saying when you use that, you're talking about the different pillars?
Correct. Yeah, the framework in the study.
Yeah.
I guess looking back, would you have done anything differently?
So in the end, amongst us, right? So we gave a very, very long memo to the mayor about all of our analysis, like looking at the components of rent stabilization, but also looking at what the rents were in various neighborhoods, where this would make a difference. I mean, it was just this extensive document, because our mayor really likes research and she likes to be very well informed. And in the end, she thought our proposal was probably too aggressive. She has a very good political sense and wanted to focus more on anti-gouging than rent, really like minimizing rent increases.
Mm-hmm.
I'm oversimplifying. And so she said, I think we should have we should allow for higher rent increases. And so I think for me, just very personally, I think we probably should have had that conversation like much earlier. Instead, we thought we were going to do all this research and make recommendations. And probably I probably in hindsight would have checked in. I would have checked in earlier with her. I also think that we focused an awful lot on what the policy should look like and the components, and then it went to the State House and died a pretty quick death. And it was unlike transfer fee or other bills that we have put up, TOPA, other bills that we've put at the State House that are a lot. I mean, they churn and we fight, and there's hearings and we get people out and right to counsel, and then they die, right? We can't get anything through the state. But I felt like this just died very, very quickly, and there was very little interest in it. And I probably just personally would have done some more work to ensure that there was more receptivity at the state before the bill went up. But newly elected mayor, she ran on rent stabilization, and we just felt like we needed to get, this work done very quickly. But I think, those are my two. I would have checked in with my boss much earlier, and I think we would have had, would have worked harder. By the time the bill went up to the State House, we would have had more support than we did. That's more process probably than the actual policy.
Yeah.
No, that's super helpful. And I guess related to that, given this, the statewide efforts, the ballot petition, the SB1, the right to stabilize, the act to stabilize tenants, rents and protect tenants, mouthful.
Yep.
Both of those things sort of being under debate, do you think that helps or hurts us in this case?
I think it very much helps, right? I mean, if the ballot question passes, and this is just my opinion, it's not a ballot, it's not how we would have designed this. It's not the policy we would have put in place, but my understanding is that the legislature can still be some revisions to it. So at least, I think it shows elected officials that people really want, I think even the polling helps. If we're serious about housing, we've got to do something about rent stabilization, something about it. So I think just getting around the real estate industry and having those polls come out and say, what is it, 60% of people polled are in support of, it's wow, so I think that process is helping what we couldn't penetrate at the State House. If it doesn't pass, I think the legislature still might be more willing to take it up in some form, at least maybe even enabling legislation and let cities and towns figure out what they want to do, because they're politicians, they're seeing that there is widespread interest in this. And I think sometimes they hear a lot more from, and I'm not against developers, but they hear a lot more from real estate professionals than they do tenants that are suffering. So I think just getting this in the mix and the conversation is great. I wish that the ballot question was crafted differently. I think it would have a greater chance of success. I wish it was more of an enabling piece of legislation, but here we are.
Did you get any feedback from the legislature, or did anybody call up and say, hey, maybe if you had had this or that, it would have been different? Or was it just flat out, nah, bye?
So, we had some people sign on, but it really just didn't land. And then I think we knew that, and we started working on other legislation pieces. I think we were very close with transfer fee, and then I think, if my memory serves me correctly, we just sort of pivoted pretty quickly to other pieces. But yeah, no, it wasn't. I was surprised. So, and I guess that's lesson 2. We shouldn't have been.
Well, that 60% figure is pretty compelling. And I just read today, I think it was in the Globe, that 60,000 people have left.
Yeah.
Lost.
Yeah. Massachusetts, I think.
Massachusetts, in part, I'm assuming because of the rents.
Yeah, because of high housing costs. Yeah. Paige, I'm sorry, you have your hand up, or? David?
No, that's okay. I just wanted to add, Sheila, you would have a better sense than I do because you were more involved with the folks in the process of putting it to the legislature. Do you feel like were advocates in support of the anti-gouging element? Or, is that something that kind of made it not land? Is they weren't even really willing to fight for it at that point because it didn't really seem that helpful.
I think that's a really interesting observation. Yeah, they would say something is better than nothing right now, but they weren't excited about an up to 10%, allowable increase. And the real estate lobby was doing double time, right? So yes, Paige, I think probably nobody was happy. So there wasn't, fire to get this thing passed.
David, did you want to
Yeah, when you just explained, Sheila, looking back, was the mayor kind of, your point of contact for the legislature or gatekeeper? I mean, like the developers lobbyists, they knew who to talk to. And, did you guys have a sense of who you should talk to ahead of time?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we have an IGR department, so intergovernmental affairs or relations. And so, we're always putting legislation up and we know what committee, and they're pretty skilled. They're a pretty skilled group. And it's funny, I think I sort of blocked this out of my mind, but I think we knew early on that there wasn't enough interest, and I think we just put our energies elsewhere. But yeah, we know, I mean, we've got allies. There's a big Boston delegation, as you can imagine, because, the legislature is, is based on population. So we have a lot of friends and, and I think we got a fair number of folks to sign on to the legislation, but we didn't have champions. And I think at the State House, you really have to have champions if you want to move something.
Thank you.
So before we go forward, I just want to check in with you guys on time, because we have a couple people from the public that wanted to ask a question. Is that okay with you guys?
Sure.
Sure.
Did you want to?
Can I just ask? I'm talking very freely. There's no press here, right?
No, but it is a recorded meeting.
That's okay. That's all right. That's fine.
I wanted to address, if I could, I had made a statement earlier, but you weren't with us yet. One of the things that you had mentioned, that you had done this survey a year or two ago, and tenants have become much more organized since then. There's a lot of associations within different apartment complexes and a tenants union, and there's a lot going on here in Easthampton, and there's a lot going on in Northampton, and there's a lot going on in Springfield. So we have Western Mass over here, and I'm sure it was a tremendous undertaking to try to get the opinions and whatnot, but I wonder if there's some way that we possibly can get some new information in about what's going on. That would be one. Number two, and I just want to put this out there, and would be landlords who in writing specifically stated that they need to go ahead and do this rent increase in order because they're concerned about the rent freeze. We have that in writing and we have it verbally, and my rent went up $525 in a year. Okay, and we have a lot of people out here in Easthampton that have gone up $300, $500 in a year. Okay, and they've been organizing, and they've been able to go ahead and get some of the landlords to reconsider that and change some of that. But most of them all, no. I mean, if you don't pay it, you're evicted. And this is what's going on here now, and I'm sure it's going on in a lot of other places. So, and then the other thing would be specifically asking, if this doesn't pass, if it doesn't go through, what about all this extra money that you're insisting I have to have in order to have a place to live? Does it get reimbursed? Well, no, but we probably would do something. Can I put it in an escrow account? Can I do this? Can I do that? No, they just want the money. And it's like, you're asking me to invest in your business. What's my rate of return? Can I borrow against your equity line? To me, I'm sorry, it's ridiculous. And then the other thing that I said when you weren't here was possibly landlords. I mean, everybody has to be licensed for everything. Plumbers, every contractors. Maybe landlords should be licensed. Okay? And there'll be a fee, and there'll be a class, and there'll be rules and regulations of what you're supposed to do as far as increases and keeping up with your maintenance. And the money that's generated from it goes back into different organizations that are trying to help people. Right now, I would have to say in the last 2 years, there's got to be hundreds of thousands of people who are elderly on fixed incomes and younger people coming up who can't afford. There's got to be a tremendous amount of people that are added into this situation. I've said enough. If you could add anything to any of this and give us some hope, I would greatly appreciate to hear it.
We're looking for hope.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. But your first comment, we did hear that if you pass rent stabilization, we're going to have to raise everybody's rents because then we're going to be limited in what we can do in subsequent years. So that, I mean, certainly landlords bring that up, had brought that up quite a bit, and that there would be a lot of harm done. I think that might have some merit, that if you're saying rent stabilization is going into effect January 1 of 27, that landlords aren't going to say, okay, I'm going to raise folks' rent. I guess the way that I became not comfortable with it, but sort of reconciled, was that if we had some kind of rent stabilization, that over time it would help a lot more people than it would potentially harm in the short term. And in Boston, most developers, not all, charge what the market bears now. So, that was not going to be everybody's situation because they were already at market. But I do hear you about a lot. We have a very, very large number of, especially older adults living on fixed income, that are just getting surprised every single day with massive rent increases, especially when properties change hands. And, I've told some of you, we're trying to build as much affordable housing as we can. We just crossed the 60,000 unit mark. I mean, we're really, really, really trying. But, I always say, until we have an affordable home for everyone, we really need some control on the market. But, so I agree with you. Paige, your hand's up.
Yeah, I would just add that there is the ability. I know when I worked on rent stabilization in the Bay Area, we had a provision that established a date upon which the maximum rent was calculated, and it was a date that was far behind. It was like when we first started talking about the policy. And it was called the rollback date. And the intent of that was to make sure that the maximum rents were based upon before landlords would have implemented rent increases in anticipation of rent stabilization. So there are ways to build in some of those protections.
Is that in the law?
I know that doesn't help you now.
That's in place in California.
Oh,
We're going to talk about that a little bit later, I think, if we get to it, depending on how much time we have.
And, if I could just add one thing too, our policy, as you probably saw, did have vacancy decontrol, right? So when people moved out, a landlord could reset the rent, and the current ballot question doesn't allow for that. I think that's a harder policy, but that's what the advocates put together wanted to do. But I was comfortable with vacancy decontrol.
Yeah.
And Alex, you want to ask something?
Yeah, I just had a question about the Boston proposal. From what I saw there, the rates of increases that it allows for are much more generous than the statewide initiative that's going to be on the ballot in November. Is there a reason for that?
It was, in the end, it was the administration's decision that they wanted. I think they were thinking about the likelihood of success here. And they very much wanted to stop gouging, someone getting a 50 or 100% increase, which we see with regularity here. And I think they thought that was more realistic as far as getting it passed. And also it's what they wanted to focus on first. But you're right, it was much more generous.
So one last question, and I don't know if one last question that I have is related to how things have changed in Boston since the process has ended. Do you see like a greater consolidation of corporate landlords? Like, do you see a greater uphill battle if you were to start this today in Boston? Or do you feel like even though it failed, some of your coalition and the policy advocacy network that you built around this issue, has that persisted?
I think the advocate community, which is really, we have a lot of advocate groups in Boston, but certainly they're connected statewide. I think the conversation and their success so far has very much helped. I think what makes would probably make, passage of a home rule petition for Boston right now harder, but not impossible, is that we've seen a real slowdown in market rate construction. I don't know if you're experiencing it, but we are seeing just a drop off in new construction of market rate housing. And developers now are saying with frequency that it's high interest rates, yes, it's high construction costs, but it's also equity providers, national and international equity providers being scared to death of investing in cities and areas where there's rent stabilization. So the real estate community is now saying, hey, you think it's bad now? And it's important for Boston's tax base. It's important for Boston's vacancy rates. We always need to be building housing. But they're saying now it's going to be really, really difficult if you pass this. So I think there's been some added, I think the ballot question is making the conversation easier, and the economic climate is making it harder. Sorry, in real estate, there's never a clean answer, but I think those two forces are at play. Paige, anything to add?
I think yeah. What Sheila said.
Okay.
I don't really understand that argument, though. I don't understand why rent control would prevent a builder from building more housing unless the builder was planning to be also the landlord.
Yeah. Well, it's developers not being able to raise private equity right now. I mean, that's part of it. The returns these are equity providers that you and I aren't. I mean, I don't run in those circles either. It's like big pension funds and international REITs and, people that really invest in very large real estate development. They're like, we're hearing that they are like just turned off right now by Boston. More specifically Boston and maybe Massachusetts. And so they're like taking their money and investing it elsewhere. And the rent stabilization question is making it harder.
Got it.
I don't know. Is it true? I don't know. But I do think that as a backdrop is making the conversation a wee bit more complicated.
Well, and it's like the economic backdrop is also a good excuse it's like greedflation. It's like yeah. David, do you have anything else?
Well, just in general, those kind of finance instruments, those kind of financiers also are susceptible to herd mentality. So as soon as, it might very well be just an excuse, a shallow excuse, but those people, they uncover a rock and they move on to the next one. And if that rock isn't good, if Boston's out of favor at the moment for whatever reason, private, in all honesty, the absence of private equity is not a bad thing, but it is part of the financing world.
Yep. Thanks.
I'll say, I think we should probably let our guests go, but one last question.
No, it was something for later.
Oh, okay.
We'll discuss it afterwards.
Well, if no one else has any questions, I'll just extend again, deepest gratitudes from the committee and from, I can't speak for the whole city, but it's seriously huge that you took the time to come meet with us.
Of course. And I think we're all trying to solve this together. And I always think about like other major cities that have some form of rent stabilization, right? They have some form, and New York and San Francisco and, just DC, and there's just there, and we've lost all of that in Boston, in 1993. And I wish cooler heads would prevail. We could just get in a room and work something out that works for everybody, but that hasn't happened yet, but I'm glad you're all discussing it.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sheila. Thank you so much. And Paige, thank you also. Thank you.
All right, take care now. Yeah, we're here. If you have any ideas you want to bounce off of, and if we, if you probably check in with us, but if you hear something about the ballot question or whatever, and you're kind of curious about what we're hearing, just please reach out and we'll tell you what we know.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
You have my email, so feel free to reach out, and I can loop Sheila in.
Will do. Thank you again so much.
Have a good night. Bye.
All right.
We contact them again in a month or so and ask them if they might be interested in getting some people from Boston, from the Hill, to come out and see what's going on in Western Mass. If they could come out here and we could all get organized with our different groups, and if we need to get signatures or whatever we could do to try to impress on them a little bit more. What's happening here is different than in Boston. Engaging this whole thing based around what's going to be acceptable in Boston. And a lot of landlords are taking those numbers from there and saying, that's the rate here. And they're overinflating everything.
Yeah, no.
Because it's smaller people, okay, who have rentals. They're not jacking it up. I just spoke to someone with a beautiful 2-bedroom apartment. $1,000, that's what they get. You know what? We don't ever have to look for anybody. Our people stay forever. I guess so.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good idea. So 2 things in response to that. One, I think that's a great idea, and we can talk as a committee. I know that the city of Boston might not necessarily be the best group to make that request to the legislature, but I know that we have contacts in the legislature that we could contact. I know our delegation and also some people out in Boston. The second is, at any time, how I got in contact with them is I just emailed the housing@boston.gov web email, and they got back to me within a week. So if you have any more detailed questions, I'm sure you can direct them there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I had it was the thing that I mentioned earlier. So I hear from there that there's been a slowdown in construction at the market rate, and I recall a similar thing from the previous meeting. It seems that the idea of the construction at the market rate appears to be, like a better term, seems to be the problem, that the market construction is the problem. Is there any way that we could have that construction done by the town or directly at the direction of the town without getting the market involved, or getting the market involved as little as possible?
Yeah, I mean,
I think that there is something that is happening right now here in Easthampton. I think the mayor has approved some funds to help with the Ferry Street project, and I don't know all the details of that, so.
well, yeah, so there is the CPA will support developers in developing affordable housing. And we've done that a couple times. But I'll also say the construction issue isn't just landlords and developers deciding that, they want to charge too much money. It's a structural issue that's been caused by decades of underinvestment in housing construction, and the construction industry never recovered from the 2008 recession. So we never have really gone back up the rates of construction historically. So that makes construction more expensive. We have less people who can do it, and the aging workforce that's not necessarily replacing itself fast enough. And then on top of that, because construction is getting so expensive, insurance is getting expensive, and it's just creating this spiral. So I think it's multifaceted, but the city getting involved in developing, we would run into the same issues with costs and trying to make it all piece together. We just wouldn't have any better luck. The ownership piece, I think, is interesting. The city expanding our socially owned or publicly owned housing. I think that's an idea. I know that in my research, I've come across legislation that was passed at some point that has prohibited that or something like that. So definitely, I think that's a conversation that the city is definitely open to. But I don't.
Yeah, I mean, on the affordable housing side, the reason why so Massachusetts is one of the only states in the country that has both state and federal public housing. So the Easthampton Housing Authority, that is state public housing that's funded by the state. There's only a handful of states in the country that have housing like that. And there's been widespread disinvestment from the state of Massachusetts in public housing. And so that's why we don't see ever, even on the federal side, new public housing being built. And from the state's perspective, the state actually does a poor job investing in the upkeep and operating of their state public housing. Federal public housing tends to be, historically tended to have a little bit more investment, and but we have very few federal public housing units in Western Mass. It's mostly concentrated in our larger cities like Springfield, Holyoke, Chicopee, Amherst, Northampton. So, and the financing for there is just not there. So you don't, the federal government, even though they might invest in what exists, they don't build more of it. What we really have is just the low-income housing tax credit program, which is great, but it's highly competitive. That's why we have developers that have to apply multiple rounds in the state to get financing, and it often doesn't serve our lowest income folks. So it's a big problem that we're not going to be able to only solve here in Easthampton, unfortunately.
Jana, in the 70s, this is part of the stuff that I learned in looking at California. The feds halted funding for the new public housing development whatsoever, and even for maintaining existing housing. So the HUD funding went from 8% of the federal budget down to 1% of the federal budget, which included slashing Section 8 assistance. And then in 2008, as a result of that housing crisis, so the number of renters increased nationwide by 6 million renters that were added to the economy. And that was because of, people they weren't making any money. They couldn't meet their mortgages. They got ousted from their homes. There were foreclosures. They just couldn't afford it anymore. So there's, these are just some of the things that happened that impacted on the funding that's available for new housing, for both federal and yeah.
Is there any way that the city or a group of cities could offer municipal bonds towards housing?
I don't think
the amount of money is just so much, we wouldn't get enough interest for people to invest in the bonds.
I don't think that private developers we need them. We actually, the city and the state can't actually solve this. We can't solve this problem without the private developers. Right. We still need the private developers to build all kinds of housing, because the more market rate housing we have, we just need more of every kind of housing. So I don't know that switching it all to be city run helps us as much as we just need kind of lots of partners in the pool.
Well, if there was enough money that was raised in bonds, it doesn't have to be a complete total city venture, because they can hire these contractors and other developers who might participate in the fundraising. It's just an idea. That's all.
So I'm just gonna interrupt for a second, because our public speak time is actually over. And we do have some other things we need to get to on our agenda. So I'm going to suggest that we move forward in our agenda now.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good idea. And we answered your question fully, right?
I believe so.
Okay.
Yes.
And definitely follow up with me if you. I did talk about this at my. All right.
Copy or not.
So I will be brief. I'll admit, like I mentioned, I have been ear deep in the building codes and stuff. So I've had a hard time fully preparing for this presentation, but I did read the report and I can give you a very short overview. So the Our Homes, Our Future rent control advocacy paper, an overview. It was a collaboration between Policy Link, Popular Democracy in Action, and the Right to the City Alliance. The writers included a team of tenant organizers, policy advocates, lawyers, researchers, and then those are the main authors. Their main thesis, or the point that they're really trying to get across, is that if rent control were implemented in all the 45 states without existing policies, potential 31.5 million additional renter households will be stabilized. And this would be particularly impactful for households of color, which are disproportionately renters and disproportionately make up the low-income renter group. So expanding rent control would not only empower tenants, but lift up communities and help advance racial and economic justice. And I will say it's like 150 pages.
I saw that last.
Yeah, like I'm not gonna go into super detail, but it has a great executive summary. Yeah, I'm just reading like 4 pages. So I thought this was interesting and important to bring out is they define the key terms rent control versus rent stabilization, and they establish a new term that I haven't really heard, or the distinction between first generation rent regulation policies, which were like rent freezes or rent ceilings, versus second generation rent regulation policies. They also though say that you can use it interchangeably with rent stabilization and that there's no like real policy difference.
Is the first, second gen difference meant to imply that rent control was used more historically and now rent stabilization has come into play? Okay.
Yeah. So like it's usually meant to mean like more moderate rent control that limit increases and implement like a schedule rather than just like you can't. Yeah. And then they have this really interesting history of the rent control across the country. I won't read all of these, but the whole chapter goes really in depth. It's really interesting.
That part is really interesting. I was looking at that as well.
Yeah.
It started out in World War II, 1942, when there was rent control nationally. It was a federal policy. And then it was lifted at some point.
I guess that was the wage price freeze that they did. Just,
Everything was frozen.
Yeah.
Including rents.
And they like pretty strictly enforced it. Too.
Yeah.
No, it's true, actually.
Yeah. So chapter 2 is sort of understanding the battleground. So they go over the renter demographics and who the population that this is impacting across the country. They sort of appraise what the drivers of the crisis are. In their view, it's mainly private equity acquiring large shares of housing stock, rental units being owned by institutional investors. I guess as of 2023, they're majority owned by institutional investors across the country. And then thousands of units are lost each year due to several reasons, such as tenant conversions, condo conversions, and that kind of thing. And also losing affordable housing as it comes off the rolls. And then they also detail corporate lobby opposition, and there were some wild statistics in there. And there's a ton, they like go full out and like show you the actual organizations and how much they spend and what their revenue is. And like, there's a whole matrix. But something that I thought was really interesting was the $326 million between 2020 and 2023 spent by 6 corporate lobbyist firms. And I guess what was interesting and part of the history of the Massachusetts rent stabilization or rent control fight speaks to this history, but the lobby sort of learned that the best strategy was to take a statewide approach and start doing statewide preemptions because they knew they couldn't win politically at the city level. So there are like multiple states that have preemptions, and it was like basically this policy advocacy group called ALEC came in and went to multiple different states and said like, hey, conservative real estate lobby and like all your people in the state house, like here's a policy you should pass, and got it passed like clockwork. They also have some interesting graphics. They do like a map of households earning less than $50,000 a year that are paying more than 30% of their income, which a lot of us have seen graphics like this a lot.
30. That's cute.
Yeah. And that's considered cost burdened. So, and this just shows that that's not necessarily equally felt across different demographics. So you can definitely see like people of color, Black households, Asian American households, like it's definitely stratified. Why rent control? They make the case that it's really 2 things. And the third thing I didn't include here because I just didn't really have a good bullet to put with it. But tenants gain stability and long-term affordability. So studies have shown that when tenants living in rent-controlled apartments move less frequently, the example of what happened in LA after they passed the rent stabilization, like moves dropped like almost 40% the following year. So like people don't necessarily want to move if they have a place that they can call home. So that leads into the next point, which is they found rent control benefits entire communities. So it's stability in the community. It boosts local health and educational attainment. It strengthens social safety nets, democratic participation in the community, and it boosts the local economy as households can spend more of that money in the local economy rather than on rent. And also, I thought this was interesting that studies have found students who experienced 0 moves over their childhood are over 10% more likely to graduate than those who moved 3 times. Oh, and the third one that they included here was that it's popular. And I just felt like that was not really necessary. So this is an interesting graph data that I haven't really dug into, so I'm not going to speak too much to it, but it just shows average disposable income and then potentially what their disposable income could be if they weren't rent burdened.
That's powerful.
Yeah, no rent burden. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So, it's not 4 common arguments, it's chapter 4, common arguments in rent control. So the 3 that they really speak to, and I'll go more in detail in the report, but it reduces housing supply, it hurts small mom and pop landlords, and it leads to neglected and dilapidated housing stock. And they sort of rebut each of these points. That says studies in New Jersey and Massachusetts found no negative impact on construction rates. Zoning and interest rates drive supply much more than rent regulations. The idea that it hurts mom and pop landlords, it's really such a small percentage. And I think they make the point that all businesses should be able to operate in a regulated market, and they already do, and that this is sort of a market that hasn't been regulated safely yet. But they also say that 91% of buildings with more than 100 units are already owned by corporate partnerships anyway. So it would be the most people affected would be these corporate entities. And then they found in Washington, D.C., in response to the neglected and dilapidated housing stock argument, they found the share of deficient units actually declined after the stabilization was introduced, which I thought was interesting. So when paired with strong code enforcement, it doesn't necessarily degrade quality. Oh, and then the guide to winning rent control, which is the last chapter, they sort of, in general, they recommend the most inclusive and protective, aggressive policy possible. And they say that you should really be fighting for the lowest caps, no vacancy decontrol, very limited exemptions,
a maximalist policy.
Yeah, a maximalist policy. And it's understandable given where they're coming from. And they also they confirm that the federal legal landscape is on our side, and that's the Supreme Court has upheld rent control policies, so there's not necessarily a federal concern yet. And then they also include strategies to address the statewide preemption, which, are essentially what we're doing already. So yeah. Any questions the report is up there if you want to read more, but I'm happy to chat about it more.
Who did the report?
So it's a partnership between Policy Link, Popular Democracy in Action, and the Right to the City Alliance. I don't know if...
And who are they?
I know that the Right to the City Alliance is related to the Jane Jacobs Right to the City movement, I think, which was sort of general. It's a Marxist or populist urban planning sort of school of thought, in contrast to the Robert Moses idea.
It's active in Boston.
Right.
Yeah, there's chapters.
So they're national organizations that have come together to put this paper together.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
Policy Link studies lots of different social policy initiatives, I think.
Yeah.
I think one of the major takeaways from this, especially with regards to the experience of the Boston attempt at the self-force rule, was that they, it appears that in the end, when they compiled their final piece to put to the legislature, they only went against price gouging in rents, and they didn't address many of the other concerns. And I believe that's probably the major reason why it failed, because all of a sudden a lot of the tenants and local people that needed the policy kind of appeared that it wasn't going to help them, so they kind of lost interest. And the developers were going to fight against it anyways. So
It's almost like the fear of the legislature not accepting it.
yeah,
Like they watered it down ahead of time, or like specifically the mayor's
pre-compromise.
Yeah, they pre-compromised and then it didn't get them anything in the end.
So it's pretty clear. I'd say the main takeaways, this is no pre-compromise. Fight for as much as we can possibly get. And, you know, then whatever we actually do get, we'll know that we at least put our all. And then we can come back and give it another go, see if we can get that the next time around.
Yeah, and I don't want to go into debates of any of the things right now because we want to stick to what's on the agenda, but I do think, you know, that's going to be a critical part of these discussions moving like towards the second half of this year. And there's going to be different perspectives in this room. And like, it's going to be sort of up to all of us to bring your perspective, for everyone else to bring their perspective and, you know, participate fully and not to take anything too personally across if we definitely will come across disagreement among that strategy. So I'm just preparing you in advance.
I'm used to it.
So Donna, I know that you had mentioned wanting to skip forward a little bit to the.
I mean, we can pass a lot of what I'm finding in California is very similar to some of what you presented here. There was another, I think it was called No Place Like Home, was a study that was done out of UC Santa Cruz. And they also went through that sort of history and talked about what were the factors that brought us to this point. But what essentially what's happened in California was there was a statewide, and well, first there were individual cities that were putting together rent control measures, and then the landlords started to get together and fight against the movement. So now cities were having a little more trouble putting rent stabilization in place. California then did a statewide mandate, and they put into law the Tenant Protection Act of 2019. That's, you know, long to short. And so this particular piece of legislation doesn't preempt what cities can do. So if a city has a policy that's more restrictive, for example, the cap is lower on the rent stabilization, this doesn't preempt it, but it does require certain things, including these tenant protections. So if the city doesn't have the tenant protections in place, then the tenant can go to the state policy, the state regulations, and get relief. So the cap in overall statewide is 5% plus the CPI, which for 2025 was 1.3. So for example, in San Francisco and everywhere else, the maximum is 6.3 that you can raise a person's rent. That's in place. And then there are also a series of tenant protections and a series of exclusions. And I'm sorry, I haven't put together a nice PowerPoint yet. And I'll try to remember all of it. But the tenant protections are essentially that you can only be evicted for just cause. You can't just throw people out because you say, you know, I want to do some renovations. You've got to be able to give them some notice on that, and you've got to be able to substantiate that they need to be moved out during that time. You have to provide them with relocation costs and expenses if that happens. If a landlord is in violation of the tenant protections, then the tenant has the right to call the rent board, and the rent board doesn't have the authority to bring litigation, but what they will do is they'll send a letter to the landlord and say, you're in violation of this particular piece of the legislation, and give them some time to correct it. If they don't correct it, then the tenant is able to go to court and bring a civil action in the housing court and obtain damages, monetary damages, in order to be able to either move somewhere else, or, you know, whatever they use the money for. there are exclusions, and there are a whole lot of exclusions. It excludes, single family homes, as long as it's not being, as long as it's not owned by an LLC or some other entity. So if you own your own home and you want to rent a portion of it, you can do that. You do have to notify your tenant that that you have an exemption from, so that they know that their rent could be increased, that it's not subject to the cap. There are also, they also, Sheila was talking about having post-dated the regulations, so that they started working on it in 2019. So whatever the rent was in 2019, that's where the cap goes forward from. So even if you jump that cap already in 2021, if in 2019 you were at a certain level and you've exceeded that cap, you can't increase the rent because of where the cap has begun.
Because the rent, it wouldn't go back to that 2019 level though.
No, it doesn't go back to the 2019 level, but you wouldn't be able to. There is a provision for vacancy if there is a vacancy that is a lawful vacancy, somebody hasn't been thrown out, you're redoing the apartment or whatever, you then can put it back on the market at market rate. So there is a readjustment at market rate.
Can I ask a question, Donna? So when you say, like, I'm confused a little bit about the part about lawful, like terminating the lease. So are they saying like you can't just terminate the lease and say, I don't want to, your lease terminates in 6 months and I don't want you to live here anymore? Like, right.
You can't do that. If you've got, if you have a tenant who's been, there's a couple of different conditions. I'm doing this from memory now, but there was so much information. But if you have a tenant that's been there for, I know it's on video now. I have to go back and correct it later. Come on. If you have a tenant who's lived there for over a year, so if it's coming up to their second year, you can't just say, I'm not going to rent you anymore because you want to raise the rent. You want to have somebody else come in there. And if you have someone who's been there, if there's one tenant who's been there for 24 months or more, even if it's a new tenant, then you can't, you also, they have the right to stay in their apartment as long as they are paying the rent, as you have said it, in conjunction with whatever the cap is. Interesting. So you can't just say, I'm going to throw you out so that I have vacancy.
Have a nice life.
Yeah, so that you can have vacancy, I can reset the rent.
The end of the lease doesn't count as a vacancy decontrol, is what you're saying?
Correct.
Interesting.
Correct.
Massachusetts has a lot of tenant protections, but you could still say like, I'm sorry, your lease is up and I don't want you to, I'm not
just say the lease is over.
Yeah, like I'm not renting to you again.
Yeah. Right. But you can't do that in California, it appears. Yeah, so let's see, what other protections were there? What else did I learn? So UC Santa Cruz wrote this whole report, and what they did was they used students. So what happened in Santa Cruz, they define it as this sort of microcosm of what happens. So they are located in an area where it's kind of close to the
Silicon Valley.
Silicon Valley, thank you. It's kind of close to Silicon Valley. So what was happening is people were coming into Silicon Valley and they were building in Silicon Valley, but they're building these dorms for tech workers to come in, and you'd live in the dorm and whatever. And as people got more, earned more, they were doing startups, they had more money, they were blah, blah, blah. They started moving out of Silicon Valley and they like Santa Cruz. So they started moving into Santa Cruz and buying up properties in Santa Cruz, which raised the property values, which also raised the rent. And they tried 3 or 4 times in Santa Cruz to input rent controls, but it just got voted down. So they have not been able to put it in place. But so UC Santa Cruz went out and they looked at all these different factors, and then they went out and they used students, they talked to people in their homes, and they had like 3 or 4 different sections of the area where they interviewed people. And there's a huge population there of folks who are low income, and then also some moderate income folks. And those people were getting displaced with nowhere to go. They talked about these percentages.
Can I just ask, like, in the interest of time, is there like one key thing you really want us to know? Because it's just looking at the agenda, we have like 4 more items, and it's
I mean, there's so much here, and I'm happy to like present later on with a little.
Or if there's like some key huge takeaway. I mean, to me, the fact that you can't ever end your lease feels sort of strange and like would be a hard pill to swallow in Massachusetts.
I think the real takeaway,
like, California is one of the strictest, if not the strictest, and that's why landlords are very like, no, we don't want that here, because they're very strict, freaked out by that, which I think there's definitely an element of validity there.
But I think the takeaway, is that it was, you can't just do the rent in a vacuum. There have to be tenant protections as well. And even with the tenant protections, people will get priced out of their home. So as people's rent is raising, for many tenants who are earning $60,000 a year or less, even if you start out paying 30% of your rent, within 5 years, you're closer to 50% than you are to 30%, because you're not. So the tenant protections are important. And there's also the local control is important. So like in Los Angeles, I think the cap is 8%. The maximum cap is 10% statewide. But I think that you have to have both things. You have to have, and you've got to have a way to kind of enforce these things. So if you go to your landlord and you say, hey, I have ants in my apartment, and the landlord says, well, move out. You can't do that as a landlord. You can't discriminate against people in that way or retaliate against them in that way.
All right. Well, thank you for doing that research. And a couple of people have gotten back to me about, where you are in your research. So I'll definitely keep following up, and potentially next meeting or the meeting after.
And I'll put some of it, I'm going to put something in writing. I just didn't get to it yet.
Yeah, no worries. We have a lot to get to.
Yes.
We also didn't do the minutes from the last meeting. I don't know if you want to do that.
Oh, yeah. Good one. Wait, I just completely skipped it.
Well, good.
Thank you for reminding me. So I guess we will go back up to the top, number 3 on our agenda, approval of minutes from previous meeting. I sent them around a couple days ago. I'm hoping you guys had a chance to review it. I will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
In favor?
Aye.
Any abstentions or no?
Well, Carl has to abstain.
Oh, yeah.
I was not able to receive those in time, so I will abstain.
All right. Okay. So going back to the agenda, we have home rule petition process and timeline. In preparation for this, I took Donna's timeline, and it's really, all the text is really small up there, and I don't know how to fix that. Maybe if we don't make the captions visible anymore.
Feel free to take off. It was just with the car noise. It was hard for me to hear.
So I think, like I was telling Donna before the meeting started, on first review, when she brought us the timeline, I was like, oh my gosh, this seems way too ambitious. It seems like we're already in February. Like, what are we talking about? But the more I looked at it, and the more like hearing Paige and Sheila talk about how a lot of the public input was really condensed, and they got a lot of stuff that wasn't necessarily super detailed. They didn't really need to piece through and debate with the public. It was much more of a debate among themselves. And to that, I feel somewhat confident that this group, given the public input and given sort of checking in with council and checking in with the mayor, like they mentioned, I think that we probably could draft a policy within the timeline that makes sense. But this, I basically just took what Donna did and made a graphic and,
So much better this way.
well, AI helped a little bit. And
Our March and April, we will schedule and do all the listening sessions. That's what I see there.
I also heard like kind of mixed feelings from the Boston folks about whether the listening sessions, first of all, we're not
Yeah.
Boston, so we don't have to do 6, but
Yeah.
it didn't feel like they found them that helpful for the most part. So, I mean, we might not need to do that many, I guess.
What I heard Donna saying and the educational.
Yes,
piece
is important.
was-
Yeah.
I mean, we are
Speaking to the
so
public.
much smaller than Boston. So if we did 1 to 2, I think that would be equivalent in terms of scale. But I do think that we should think about the listening sessions from 2 angles. I do think there's a lot of value in having a space where people can vent. Right. I mean, we hear it here tonight. I know you all are here and like you're probably thinking about your own personal stories, which is so valid. And I know a lot of you, if not all of you, come to city council, and that's a real need for people to share stories. And if I think for us, we have to think about what is the goal of the listening session, because I do think that there is a place and time and space to have the venting. And to your point, Chaim, I think that if we need policy input, maybe the listening session is not meant for that. Maybe it's more like we have an educational piece and then there's a separate forum or way that we can get input around policy from the public that's maybe not the public space where people are sharing, but we can still, like, we could potentially partner with the Easthampton Tenants Union, which is already meeting regularly, to figure out how to sort of create a space for this, but also not have the listening session be the way that we get the input that we need for policy input.
I also think that there's a lot more people out there who honestly don't know that this is organizing is happening. And so I see the listening sessions as actually a way of helping people to connect with other people. So just as a way of being able to find community, which I think is important, because I think a lot of people feel alone and they're having to make choices of like, I just have to leave, right? But if they know that other people are kind of organizing, then I think that creates more opportunity for them to connect and maybe find strategies to be able to stay. But I do agree, and I like the idea of maybe we need to think of the after piece in terms of how do we reach them to actually get that input. Like, so I agree with that.
well, and I wonder if there's more. Oh, yeah, David, actually,
Yeah, thank you. As far as the listening sessions, what I had been thinking about was if you had one for the tenants in general, and we all realize there might be some more venting than policy, but at the end of that meeting, we say that we're going to have a second meeting, and the second meeting, though, is going to be directed at suggestions. The same people are invited, but they have to come with suggestions. And that way we can kind of cover both areas. And then maybe the third meeting would be the meeting towards, I guess all meetings are open to the public, but the third meeting might be towards the landlords and developers.
Yeah.
And maybe if we reach out to them, it would be the same way. Don't come with anecdotes, come with some strong ideas. I don't care what the idea is, but come with a suggestion or a strong feeling, but not anecdotes. And then so we can kind of, because in March and April, also, you 3 of our members are city councilors. They're going to start ramping up with the budget, and and we just have to be aware of time for everybody.
Yeah. And I think we also can think about how the onus is on us on how we ask the questions too. Like, we want to sort of spoon feed the general policy pillars and make it really easy to understand, so we're not asking people to read a 60-page research report before coming and giving suggestions. And like, maybe that looks like an info sheet, or maybe that looks like focus groups or something where we like really where we really dig in and ask specific questions and get feedback on that way.
I have a question for you, David. Do you think that if we set up a specific listening session for landlords and developers, that there will be appetite for that, for those folks to come and share? Because I know from the tenant side, obviously there's appetite. I'm just curious on the other side, and I would value your input into that.
I know of one or two that are waiting for the opportunity. You know, as a, I don't know the right word, as a group, we're not very cohesive. We don't get along very well. You know, we're not a union, but I do know of two large landlords that are interested and open-minded to, you know, talking about things. The one that's, you know, the one that, is causing a lot of problems, I have no faith in that one.
All right, thank you. I appreciate that.
I mean, I feel like we sort of have to try to stick to this time thing, because if we miss the if we miss the deadline, we have to wait till 2029, or we could try to file it late. I was just looking that up, but like the chances of it getting a late file and then getting introduced is like way slimmer. So I feel like we either have to decide like we're going to try, or we're just going to slow the whole thing way down. Like it doesn't feel like getting it done in March doesn't really help us. So we should either like full steam ahead and try to do it, or like just decide we're really going to take our time and wait till 2027, 29.
Yeah. What's your view on that though, Jen? I mean, you've been through these processes before. I'm sorry.
I mean, I worked in an advocacy organization a long time ago that did file legislation, you know, and you know, so I was never really, I don't have a lot of direct experience with it. I do think like if we, to file it in the after the deadline, you know, the process of getting it introduced is really hard. I think we also need to then also have, I mean, from the Boston perspective, it's their story is fascinating to me. They were like, oh, no, we just gave up. It's like, okay.
After all that work,
we just sort of like decided to do something else. Okay.
We have other things to work on.
Yeah, we had other things to do. You know, we would need a very strong, you know, our Western Mass delegation is very strong, but we would need a lot of support to get this, to have it not die in committee, which is what happened to Boston.
We would need some of those Boston legislators that have the background, like we'd have to get Mike Connolly and some of those people to like help.
Yeah.
Well, what about other cities here, Northampton? I mean, one of our guests today noted that there were things happening in other cities, Northampton, Springfield. What about, you know, kind of coordinating with them as well on the timeline to say, you know, we're all going to submit in January of 2027, or maybe we try to build these coalitions over the next couple of years and try to have something in place in 2 years to submit.
I mean, I'd say that we started thinking this group up at this time last year.
Yeah.
So it took like a year to get to even.
That takes longer than you think it will.
Yeah.
So I don't know that bringing other cities on board now, unless they're already,
it's going to slow it down.
But we need their legislators. So like our Western Mass delegation needs to be in support of this idea, whether they represent Easthampton or they don't.
And I don't think that doesn't mean that if we were to do this, people in other cities who are thinking about this can show up and be supportive and say, hey, we're also thinking about this, or this is the way that we want to go to. So, you know, we're watching and we want you to support this and blah, blah, blah. But I think the other thing that I think we have a lot of data on Easthampton. So when I think about this kind of final, we could be putting some of those pieces together now.
Yeah.
So it doesn't feel like, oh, now we got to write this thing. I think we can be kind of writing some of those pieces as we go and then take the data. This is how I wrote my dissertation. Right. And then kind of drop in the kind of the key kind of pieces that we need to know and then kind of summarize it. And so I think it's completely doable to be able to finish that.
I do like the idea of the listening sessions, and I know that the tenants have already, there's a lot of organization. And one of the things that they did was they had a 3-minute limit. So people could speak for 3 minutes and then their time was up and they moved on to someone else. So you had to be a little concise about what you wanted to say. But that educational piece, I think, is really important, not just for the tenants, but also for developers and builders and landlords to understand that this isn't something that's going to cause them to have to immediately raise their rent. That this is what, give us some ideas on what you think would be equitable in terms of like, what do you need in order to be able to maintain your property?
Yeah, I like David's idea of the first session, just letting people to kind of come in and
Share.
do what
Get
they
it-
do,
get it off their
share.
chest.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
And
it's
then-
gonna happen eventually. You might as well get
And
it.
what are the group's thoughts? Oh, sorry.
Is going to finish. And then the second one, if we were actually very strategic about some of those key ideas, and maybe we had small groups of people, right? So then they could like bounce off ideas, and they could maybe kind of shift to different topics and things like that. So I think there's constructive ways that we can create an opportunity for them to talk about those things, as opposed to like, here's a microphone, tell us what you think, or give us, right? I think if we can be more strategic and kind of dropping those things in to get them to kind of generate those kind of suggestions, I think that would be.
Well, and then too, with the like second more strategic session, it really, I think also is on us to be very, and I'm going to say this word and I don't really truly mean this, but like very militant about how we structure the time and the sharing, because I think this is where I could see it, again, not because of any ill will, but just because these are big feelings that come up. So we would have to basically be like, if you start to veer into sharing or personal, we're just going to cut you off. And it's nothing personal, but we have to stick to whatever the focus is.
I think we also have
That's
to,
a future issue that we're talking about later.
I think we also have to recognize though that Easthampton, the city of Easthampton is much smaller and people know each other. Whereas in Boston, you have a lot of people who don't know. And so when the listening session comes up, they want to tell their story because they haven't had an opportunity to do that. We've heard a lot of these stories already. And even tonight, we had some visitors who came with suggestions and said, they're aware of the problem and they're coming in and they're saying, here's some things you can do. And I think that we might get more of that, particularly if we are able to say, these are the things we want to hear from you about what your ideas are, then maybe they would get in Boston.
Just in this, I almost want, we were talking about, do we have subcommittees or whatever, but like maybe a task committee around some people thinking about the process and come back at the next meeting and say, we suggest this dream meeting and how we might run it and stuff like that.
Like a listening session.
I'm starting working because I'm like, oh, I have a few ideas about the process. Like we don't know. But we're not going to go into all of it right now. This might be, here's a little working group. Come back next time with a proposal.
Yeah, so I guess that, unless anyone else had anything to add to the broader discussion, that was, I think, where I wanted to move this discussion towards, was hopefully tonight, setting that up and giving those people the ability to start working on that. So you mentioned potentially being interested in that?
I'd be interested.
Yeah, organizing.
Well, yes, the city did something like this before around, I don't remember what it was about, like downtown. It ended up,
We did a futures of work or a futures project.
Yeah,
which
futures project.
and it sort of, we talked about housing and there was a whole thing about how, that's how the schools thing sort of came about. And we broke into
Artists
groups.
have done a whole thing. We have some resources to fix. That's what I was thinking.
So I feel like for like number 2, like it would be like a working session. So yeah, all right, you and I are on the same page.
And are you,
That's fine.
I guess this is a can of worms, but I would wonder if the idea is to do it in like a public broadcasted meeting, or if we should try to do something like at the annex, or like something that's a little bit more like
question for the
small.
subcommittee.
Yeah, exactly.
No.
I'm just adding that to things that maybe you guys
How
could
public,
think
how
about.
private.
Yeah, subcommittee.
I mean, I'm on many committees right now, so.
All right. Okay, let's move on. Sorry, I'm hungry. No,
So you two, who else wants to, is it just you two that wanna?
we can come back at the next meeting.
And we only have so many people.
I can help too if you want, but if you're good, then.
All right.
So you'll come back to the next meeting with,
Some suggestions.
Some of the proposal.
A proposal.
Proposal.
Yeah, and I can follow up with you guys.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. So, David, you wanted to add something?
Well, just assuming we're gonna have at the moment, 3 meetings and one of them was towards the landlords. I can start working on that a little bit as outreach. And I'll just, at the moment, just say sometime in April, there'll be a listening session for landlords.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
I'll just wait for the, next meeting to iron out the date or whenever that might be.
Okay.
Awesome. All right. So that being said, we have, it's too early, to do, the next council meeting, which is tomorrow night, but the February 18th city council meeting, I think it makes sense for us to do a report out to just discuss what's happened so far, to discuss the timeline that, we've relatively agreed on. And I feel comfortable just drafting that up if the group does. And I'll just give a quick update. But I don't think we've made any big decisions yet. So there's nothing like huge to deliver, but.
Well, I mean, this timeline might be something.
Yeah, the timeline, sure.
Okay.
And can I just clarify for the minutes? So the proposal at the next meeting is gonna be
About the listening session.
about the listening sessions, and it's Jana, Carolyn, you're not on the committee,
And David.
and David, but not you, Felicia, and not you.
None of David's on there.
Do we need to vote to create that subcommittee or?
No.
No? Okay.
No, because they're just,
All right. Yeah.
it's not a quorum.
Yeah.
That's fair. Yeah.
Does David want to meet with us to talk about the process? Or David, did you just take on, like, you're gonna do the outreach to landlords and you're
Well,
fine?
I don't mind, helping out, but, my problem is I'm only in Easthampton for the next 2 months, 1 week in a month. So I would have to be either, FaceTime or email, or phone call. I'm available, but I'm in Tennessee.
Okay.
Okay.
So I will give an update at the February 18th city council meeting. Other updates. So, I put this over here. I'll just give a quick summary. So I submitted a city council resolution to be, read at the next meeting. It's probably going to be sent to committee. But essentially the goal behind it is to create this housing crisis task force. Less because I think the group needs to meet frequently, but more because I feel like this would be a good administrative change for the city. The gist of it is that we're requesting key stakeholders in the city involving like the chair of the housing partnership, the chair of the rent study committee, the chair of the planning department, our state representative, to be notified of any housing related items that cross the mayor's desk or cross the planning director's desk, like including agendas that involve housing stuff. So our agendas would go there, conversations that the mayor has with state leaders regarding housing issues, grant applications that the planning board is developing, updates on housing projects that the city is getting from developers, just so we're all on the same page. And when we're asked something, we have the correct answer to it. And also so we're not duplicating work. It's just sort of, the impetus was wanting to create a whole of government approach to addressing the housing crisis. So that hopefully, if you support that idea, you're willing to speak in support of it, either by sending a letter to other city councilors or coming to the meeting and speaking. Yeah.
Yeah, so come during public speak, so at the beginning and speak to it.
And it is public speak. It's not, there's not going to be like a separate. Okay.
Because we don't have that in our rules, right? So it has to be during public speak.
Can you send us a copy of that, or?
It's on the agenda, which is posted on the website. So
Oh,
you can
okay.
look it up.
On the same note,
Yeah, you can also take one of those copies if you want.
Do we have the, language of the resolution?
I didn't send it out, but it's available in the next, the city council agenda packet for tomorrow.
So if I wanted to send a letter of support, that'd be for tomorrow or the next meeting?
Tomorrow.
Okay.
I can send you a copy of it. I'll send a copy around to the group tonight.
So David, get writing, that's what he's doing.
Well, I don't write much, but I mean, I like to help out and support it, so I'll just.
So the other thing that I had on here was, I might have stapled it wrong. No, so there's the front page and then that's yeah, that's right.
And then
And then this, I guess, is a mistake. That was not supposed to be stapled there. All right,
You wanna
so
read it again?
the next,
You can.
the next thing that I had on the agenda was discussing, our next meeting that won't be a normal meeting. And I had a conversation with Jana, who's also the chair of the housing partnership, and she agreed that this could be a good idea. So it's the last Thursday of February,
It's
right?
March. I thought we were talking about March. Hold on. I had it written down as March 26th. We do have a housing partnership meeting in February, which would be February 26th. For some reason I thought we were talking about March, but it could be February. That's fine too.
So are you thinking that we have a joint meeting at the housing partnerships meeting? Okay.
Yes.
Basically, like, we would be invited to their meeting.
Yes.
Yes.
And the idea behind that is Kevin and David specifically had ideas that were more, I think, related to the zoning and the pro supply stuff that is much more, I think, in the wheelhouse of what the housing partnership is supposed to do. So I just wanted to create a venue to, I think, have the discussion of how the groups can support each other while not duplicating efforts. And then also to hear that feedback and get that.
Would we have, I guess, too much for you, would we have an agenda item on your agenda at that meeting, or could we, or would it be public speak?
What we did for the last joint meeting is it was just like a joint agenda.
Yeah.
And then the partnership didn't do any other business and we just did that.
Mhm.
So I think that's fine. We could do that again.
And you don't have any pressing business, right?
No,
Okay.
So it would be just one agenda and
one
then-
agenda, and we could argue over who gets to post it. Yeah, that's fine. Last time I posted it, but it doesn't really matter.
And that wouldn't be in replacement of our March meeting, which
We also have a conflict.
we have a conflict
Okay,
because
that
it's a public hearing that night or the zoning stuff, the first 4 hours of the zoning thing.
Just before we go there, are we doing February 26th?
February 26th.
Committee, we're
Yes.
going
And we
6 o'clock.
typically, at 6 o'clock, and we typically meet on conference room 1, and then we also always have a Google Meet option too.
And I don't mind because I've been sending emails to Maddie and Marianne all day. So
Oh, great, you can tell them.
Yeah. they already set up a link for us. So
Okay.
I have a conflict on that night.
On
I'm
that
going to
night,
be, I'm going to be out of state, for the second, for the, last week of February through the beginning of March.
I will also be out of state for that week as well, so I will not be here.
all right. So that our March 3rd meeting was already, we weren't going to do that. So that'll be good. Maybe we can do the following week.
Let me see that. Yes.
All right. So we're good for the 26th. That seems
Yep,
good.
that seems good.
Are we scheduling a March meeting?
Yes, that's the goal. Is our last thing we need to do. So we have a conflict on 3-3, like I mentioned. That night will be the public hearing for the We're Going Fair Housing Partnership zoning recommendations, the first half of them. Does the following week, the 10th, work for everyone at the same time?
David's here.
Not gonna be here. I would love it, but whatever you make is fine.
Sorry, what date?
The 10th.
The 10th.
March 10th.
Works for me.
Yeah, I can do that.
All right.
Yeah.
I already have
In Kayam, I was supposed to do research on Minneapolis and St. Paul, but you
Mhm.
mentioned earlier that you're gonna have the author of the study of Minneapolis. So maybe I shouldn't, there's nothing I can really do that's gonna, he'll be more authoritative than I am. So should I?
Well, you might have really good questions to ask.
Well, okay, but I'll concentrate on St. Paul, but I'll dig into Minneapolis for research.
Okay, yeah, that was actually the next thing. So March 10th works for everyone. Good.
Yep.
All right. So I had one other thing that I had mentioned when we were talking to our guests. So this Professor Ed Getz, who wrote this or is the lead author on the Minneapolis rent stabilization study that was really critical for Boston. He came and gave a presentation about the policy pillars and they referenced it throughout their process. And I reached out to him and within an hour, he got back to me over the weekend and was like, I would be more than happy to come to your meeting. Let's set up a time. So I've sent off a couple options for March and April. We'll see what he gets back. I'll I asked them to pick a few of them and then I'll bring them back to the group. And if it falls on a regular meeting day or if it doesn't, we can decide what we want to do. But
Sounds like sooner rather than later, if it's such a good model.
yeah, no, I feel like it could really jumpstart our conversations and figure out how we want to ask the questions.
Is this in our drive?
I added it to the drive. Yeah.
Great.
It wasn't there before, but I added it. All right. Thank you, everyone. It's been a good meeting, but a long one. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Aye.
Bye.
All those in favor? Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Bye, David.
This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.